All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scrollers Podcast. And my name's Matt C., and I'm here again with my friend Lance. And we're going to talk more about exclusivism, and we're going to talk more about Orthodoxy. And this is a part 2 to the conversation we had before, which you can see a link to in the description below. How are you doing today, Lance?
I'm doing good. I actually was lucky enough to have a chat with a good friend of the corner, Sam Tiedemann, this morning. He was
nice.
driving up. He's getting ready to pick his daughter up from camp in Wisconsin, so I caught him at a good time. And I was talking to him a little bit about this. And so I think it's a thread that we can keep pulling on, Matt, because I think it matters. He helped me frame this a little bit. I'm willing to admit that potentially I thought we could come to quick agreement on it. It was very clear at the end of last week's conversation. You weren't ready to jump in with me fully, which I love, by the way. So I might be wrong. I'm open to that. But I think this is a good thread to pull on. And I was trying to flesh it out a little bit. And the idea is, so if anybody who wasn't here last week, I'll share a PowerPoint that we were kind of talking about, but what I was trying to get to, my natural inclination that I felt was fairly obvious was that we're all making exclusivist claims, right? We all make exclusivist claims. And I shared some very colorful exclusivist claims across from Baptist to Reformed to Methodist to, clearly I stipulate the Orthodox do make exclusivist claims. Make no mistake about it. It's a full stipulation, right? But I felt like we all did that. But in the end, if you actually look where everyone ends up, like even where John MacArthur would say Catholics aren't Christian, he would then come back to say, however, he does believe that some Catholics will be saved. Right? I think everyone ends up to basically at that same point. Now, I think some of it might be my age, because you got to remember, I was born in 1970. So in the 70s and 80s, I grew up in a denominational world. This was pre-secret church, pre the mainline trying to become truly like full mere Christianity, full seeker, right? And so like we talked about, they're a Lutheran or they're a Methodist, or like those conversations were real. And we knew that there were these exclusivist claims. So some of it might be my age with respect to that. So my hope was we could get past the triggers that some of these exclusivist claims have. And I think the gotcha question of, are you a Christian? Because I think we need to move on to bigger things. And so McMo asked, why do you care about this, Lance? I'm like, great question. So as an individual, Matt, I don't care. I know where I'm at. I'm comfortable making exclusivist claims. I believe I'm in the correct, true place. Every church I've been there because I believe that. And I know that's to the exclusion of other things. And so I don't care personally. But I'm a part of the TLC, one. And I like to build bridges and see if we can get past triggering things that allow us to move to different places. So that would be the reason why it matters to me, right? So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Would you help with, okay, so this term exclusivist claim, if we can get everyone broadly in this category, because I'm thinking that the last time we talked, I think we discovered together that some people are comfortable and have a history of whether in evangelical circles or in Orthodoxy, having an exclusivist claim where the box is coterminous with, I don't want to say denomination because that's very Protestant coded. So I'm trying to be more generic than that.
Well,
like
I'll accept that, even though we have to, like, let's give each other grace, because when you say that, I know what you mean, which is
yeah. And and since our conversation, I've listened to more of Jonathan Pageau. I've listened to Father Stephen DeYoung had dropped a conversation with Gavin Ortland like the same hour that we did ours, and I thought we had the best conversation of the week. And then that happens, and then everybody goes and watches that. And I'm like, dang it, we really, I feel like we clinched it. We made real good progress. We got the ball down the field in the first conversation, but I realized from doing more listening that not as many Protestants in particular are. There were more Protestants than I realized, or people who grew up Protestant and have converted, or some such kind of variation, who were they just came from a background where they were used to saying my stream or denomination is the church, and so there wasn't anything new on that front when going into Orthodoxy. That was not my experience. So I kind of projected that onto a lot of even historic Protestant traditions like Methodism and or Lutheranism. I grew up Unitarian Universalist and then Methodist, but it was UMC Methodist, so it was very like chicken soup for the soul. Honestly, like my dad was a deacon and he wasn't even a Christian. He wouldn't even identify as Christian. So UMC in the South was very much like you wear a suit and tie and don't worry about anything other than be a good person and recycle.
So what time frame
it wasn't
was that?
very heavy on, the traditions of Wesley, but it was also very not exclusivist in its claims. At least in that particular thing. So I just thought a lot of Protestants were comfortable making positive claims outside of their denomination, and that is not the case.
Yeah. So what era was that when you were in the Methodist Church? Was that the 90s?
The 90s.
Okay. So I left the Methodist Church in 2001, the United Methodist Church. Well, it was all the United Methodist Church in the United States, right? The Methodist Church that I grew up with in the 70s and the 80s, right, was not what you were experiencing. I started to see, I was part of a very large Methodist church that started to go down the path of what you talked about and became one of the leaders that were supportive of this affirming split in the United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
I saw that happening and I'm like, I got to get out of here. Right? Like, so yes. So that was very different than what I was confirmed in versus what it ended up being. So for example, a good chunk, and let's, again, exclusivist claim, a good chunk of my confirmation in 1983 as a 13-year-old, which shouldn't surprise people if they understand Methodism, was refuting Reformed Calvinist claims. Because listen, Wesley, much like George MacDonald, one of Wesley's biggest things, they called him, they made fun of him, they called him Arminian. So he called his newsletter the Arminian, like he wore, like, I'll wear this proudly.
Absolutely.
Right. But so I think that I think some of this is the fact that I'm older, and I have to understand that you guys that are millennials probably grew up, the mere Christianity, watered down pluralistic claims became much more strong in the 90s and the new 2000s, even in the mainline, as they were trying to survive the seeker and the end of modernity and everything that was happening, post-modern, like all this stuff. Like, so where I thought you and I can't share the screen. God bless. McMo is giving us the opportunity to use his stream. Thank you, McMo. We appreciate that. And he's recording this for us. And so I can't share the kind of, we were working on these claims. And so what I will capitulate to in the United, by the way, we're speaking about Christianity in the United States, guys, because that's all that Matt and I can speak about. Right. And Philippus is like, you can tell Lance is American. Yeah, that's all I know, Philippus. I don't know what it's like in Canada. So you can speak to that. But I'm speaking about the country I live in, and I think the things that we can do. So yes, I grew up at a time in the 70s and 80s and heard where, like, your mom wanted you to find a Methodist girl to marry. Like Paul Vanderklay, I guarantee his grandmother and his mom and dad wanted him, he talks about the circulatory system. The hope and wish is that he would find a nice CRC girl up at Calvin to marry.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, right. And so, but I think that really started to change drastically. Particularly it started in the 90s when the mainline started to bring in the seeker model, like the contemporary services and getting rid of a lot of liturgy. And then we saw the collapse of the mainline, the divorces over what I think the product of mere Christianity and not being willing to make exclusive claims ultimately is the only way you can lead to a fully affirming church.
Not making exclusivist claims. Okay, so not being exclusivist was the route. The goal was to be affirming.
I just think it's part of the soup. I think it's part of the soup, right?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Because I think we don't like making exclusivist claims. It's very uncomfortable for us, right? In certain realms. Let's just jump out to the culture. Let's just say it started in the 90s. What was that funny movie, PC University or whatever, where they were making fun of all the political correctness or whatever? It was a bad, stupid comedy movie. I don't know if you watched it. But I was a child of the 90s where we laughed at that kind of stuff. But then that became the norm and a lot of pressure for young people, right? To not be exclusivist, right? And that ultimately played its way out within churches, right? And it's how you can set aside thousands of years of traditional views on, like, what is a man, what is a woman, all this other sort of stuff that we did that. So I think largely there's some societal things that happen, and I think we can start pulling on some threads that I think we can move this conversation forward. And Sam and I, the next conversation, I know you're cool with this. I'd love to bring Sam on, because Sam is just like, I think that this could be it. So I was testing this with Sam, and I said, Sam, let me see if this is correct. I said, okay, Sam, me and you as just men, I'm a lay person, like whatever. I would call Sam a Christian brother, right? He's a Unitarian. I'm a Trinitarian.
Okay. Colloquially speaking, is that what we're saying?
Well, but like, he's like, we understand we think some essential differences, like, and Sam's like, yes, right? I don't speak for the Orthodox Church, and as a member of the Orthodox Church, I don't, right? And by the way, I do not speak for the Orthodox Church. Like, don't, like, go ask your priest this stuff or whatever. And yes, the Orthodox are making these claims. So I said, Sam, actually, if you were speaking for the Unitarian Church and you were asked to speak on whether or not I was a Christian, you would technically say no, right? However, everyone ends up at the space of, but all this stuff is up to God, okay? And so that's why I think this whole "are you a Christian" question is a gotcha question that we as Christians need to get past. Because I think if you're being intellectually honest about the positions that we take, right, there are very specific claims. So I would just say Methodist and Calvinist views couldn't be more different on, I would think, essential issues, right? Orthodox, and so I can only speak to my own training. I know what I was taught as a 13-year-old in confirmation class, right?
Yeah.
I know that Orthodox and Calvinist views could not be more different on what we would consider kind of some essential things, whether God's working good for all people and the salvation of all people, or whether you believe in some sort of an election and other. There are sharp differences. Like we've had these. I was having arguments with Protestants my whole life. Other Protestants, Matt, like we don't all see eye to eye on some fairly important things, you know. And so,
but are there any? Because this is something else that came up in our last conversation. Is your tradition in Wesleyanism doesn't and in Orthodoxy too doesn't talk about primary and secondary, like central and peripheral disagreements, it seems like.
well,
and that surprised me too, because that's very central to my tradition, my adopted tradition, is that we make clear distinctions, bright distinctions between all these secondary disagreements and a few central disagreements.
I think so. This is where the deal where you don't have to necessarily define it, like you just know it and you see it. Like it's obvious that it's primary, and other things are whether you would order them the same way or whatever. I just think like I'm trying to get back to the natural and normative, what it's like to live and feel it and do those things. That I think that in Protestantism, yes, I was taught systematic theology, Gruden's systematic theology, like I understand that. And we would talk about, in essentials, unity, and non-essentials, liberty, like all that sort of stuff. So I've been taught all the hierarchies of like what that is. But even if you don't follow the same methodology to do that, I think we can all agree that, yeah, like there are. So for example, in Orthodoxy, what do you point to? You point to the Nicene Creed. That's what you point to. That's it. That's a symbol of the faith. That's what you declare when you come in. There's a lot of different things that people write about, but everything I've seen, my priest has always pointed to me, well, you want to know what we believe? That's the Nicene Creed. Okay?
Yeah. Same with the PCA and many other Protestant denominations.
Right. So, but where I thought was, and so this, where I think I would get to was, and like I talked to Sam. Sam largely agreed that if we were being intellectually honest with ourselves, we do view other, and I'll use the word denominations too. I think that's fine. Like we do view like other denominations, like whether there's a Trinity or not, Unitarianism versus Trinitarianism, that's an essential. Like that, like to people, like that's an essential.
Seems like a core doctrine. Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be a lot of people. So that's why I think Sam's like that's a good example, right?
Yeah. I appreciate him anathematizing us. Actually, that would help the conversation.
Right. But then on the flip side, but on the flip side, he and I both talked about it. He says, Lance, I consider you a Christian brother, right? But if I were put in a situation where I'd have to say, okay, technically, Sam, like if you would put what Lance believes or whatever, he would say, yeah, like, no, I don't think that's Christian, what you're proposing and what you believe.
So you could be saved despite your Trinitarianism.
100%.
Which I appreciate, because I think what you guys are both saying, and this is something I appreciate, is that you both and I'm going to use a Protestant term here, but you both believe in solus Christus. You both believe that Christ himself, the real God-man, saves sinners, not our intellectual, doctrinal, theological, propositional assertions save us. That's really big. So that would be one thing that I think we all. That's huge. I don't know if Orthodoxy navigates that as well as a Wesleyan would, or a Unitarian or a PCA Presbyterian.
Oh, I think Orthodoxy does the same way. So, for example, Orthodoxy absolutely holds that God is the one who's doing the saving. Christ, through his incarnation, life, death, resurrection, and all that stuff, that we can't save ourselves. We are not. Mary, even though we believe she was a sinless, perfect human being, she could not save herself. God is doing the saving. We all agree on that. There's no disagreement.
But do you make the negative statement that theology doesn't save you, or like theological agreement? Like, you don't have to be aligned. Being in theological alignment doesn't save you. That would help. I know that's a tricky conversation. It would just help Protestants to understand where Orthodoxy.
Well, so I would. Again, please. I wish we had a little chiron on the bottom, and I would say this, which is like, I am not speaking for Orthodoxy. Like, if you really want to, Father Young, or
that's like saying, this is another thing that people brought up from our last conversation, though, is like, I like that you're saying that, but then it just kind of, doesn't that invalidate what you're saying from an Orthodox?
No, well,
because I can speak on behalf of Presbyterian, because that's in line.
I think it's just
Protestants can talk on behalf of Protestantism.
Well,
you can't, in a way, and that
does that
undermine the position that you're.
No, because I actually don't think. I think there's a humility that we should all have, right?
Okay.
And even as a Protestant, so for example, before every sermon I gave, stole this from my disciple, my leader, my seminary, I would pray, Father God, please, everything that I say that is untrue, please let it fall away. Everything that I speak that is truth, please let it remain in their hearts. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Because the struggle I found in an earnest person who was trying to make his way in a non-denominational Christian sense was, I'm telling you, Matt, if you actually really dig into something, you read this commentary says this commentary says that. Sometimes they're in direct opposing one another. I'm trying to get to it mattered to me as a Protestant to try and get the right answer, Matt. You know what I mean? Or at least preach true things and those sorts of things. And so I would say, as it would relate to, I would have said that about Methodism too, but but I think it is important, which is, I'm fairly new here, right? I'm not as well, I've lived it and those sorts of things. So I would say this, which is like, Orthodoxy is a way of life, is the way it's described, right? So start participating in the way of life, come into the church, participate in the way of life. If you are participating in the way of life and those sorts of things, that whether you understand the energies, essences, distinctions, and those sorts of things, like, they don't matter, right? To your ultimate, like, if you don't understand that theology stuff well, is that going to dictate whether or not the question is, are you saved or whatever?
It's not the means of your salvation is your intellectual understanding. Yeah.
But then also, the nuance there is this the same as anything else? Is that, like, the creed? So let's just point to the creed. Like, yeah, we believe this. Like, you need to understand this. We have one God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth and all things visible and invisible, and one Lord Jesus Christ. You need to, like, there's some things that over time that you're growing into, but and then the Evagrius Ponticus basically says, the one who truly prays is a theologian, and the theologian is one who truly prays. Okay? So getting all the book scholastic stuff is not necessarily what makes a theologian. So there's this other spirit there. So, but yeah, like, there's a reason why people love following Father DeYoung, right? Like, people who are, if you're a person who's coming into Orthodox Church, you're hungry to hear and learn, and particularly United States Florida people, you're hungry to hear and learn about those things and so on and so forth. So you want to have correct belief. You want to understand things. You want to get your theology. That's all part of it. But to be fair, but also Protestantism. Why do you call me Lord, Lord? Do not do what you say. Like our focus was pretty primitive, right? At house church, we thought we were doing Acts 2 house church, right? And our whole thought is like, listen, it's not just like, I'd rather not call myself a Christian. I'd rather be recognized as one. Like, live this thing. Like, don't just say it and then just have it as one part of your life that you do once on Sunday. Like, actually become a disciple, right? Do the things he says. Like, live the life. Those sorts of things. So,
can I ask? Okay, so that framing is eminently recognizable, I think, to most Christians of any denomination. And again, we're using that term very generically. But is it easier to describe what you just characterized as good, better, best practices for being a Christian, or you're a Christian or not a Christian? Do you know what I mean? Like, are we policing the edges, or are we? Because something I've tried to chat about in other conversations is whether or not I use the metaphor of tent poles versus fences, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if we're aligned, if we're just trying to discuss the tent pole, the center point, I don't even know where the fence is. I don't even know if there is a fence. I don't know how far you are out, but I know you're better when you're closer to the tent pole, because that's the structure that's holding everything up. But the fence motif is more like you're either in the ark or you're not. And we're that's the structure. We're mostly concerned about whether or not you're in the fence scenario. This is, I'm not contrasting those and making them compete to show that one's better. Obviously, I'm more of a tentpole Christian by conviction. Right. So but I can see the validity of Catholic and Orthodox traditions that seem to be more fence oriented. Like, let's get you in, and then once you're a Christian in good standing, the traditions that talk about being in good standing. So if you're participating in the life, then you're in the fullness of the church, then you're in the fence. Then there's all these secondary things, whether or not you're a universalist, whether or not there's all kinds of ways, whether or not you would call a Protestant your Christian brother. There's all these ways in which we can disagree inside the fence, because now you're in the sheepfold, you're in the ark. Whereas a temple, like they're not trying to get you in the minimum boundary at the edge. They're more concerned like, well, of course we're going to disagree on all kinds of things, but like, are you at least holding to the essentials?
Right.
And well, so maybe that's not even mere Christianity, because the five solas are tent poles in a way, and they're meant to bind Catholic and Protestant brother together in unity. And I think in some ways Vatican II.
No, but they don't. But they're actually the solas are exclusive by the solas were. Let's admit that solas were created as a way to reject Catholicism.
I think my understanding is they were an appeal to reform again, to reform Catholicism back to true Catholicism, which is very different from a schismatic view.
But Luther truly started out, he truly was in protest and didn't view himself as schisming off. He ultimately thought that the reforms, that he could reform the Catholic Church, right? I think Nathan Jacobs talked about this recently.
I think that's
it's actually a good question. Like, he's like, this is actually a good question we need to ask about whether we can come back into unity, which is, are you still protesting but wanting to then seek unity back into, are we trying to ultimately come back together in one church? Or have you been like, yeah, I don't really have I'm not protesting anymore. I'm broken off, right? I'm doing this other thing, which is it's really difficult also. Like, we got to get rid of this. I knew this being a Protestant, the flavors and the differences in Protestantism are vast.
Yeah, and you can tell that this impacts our topic of exclusivism, because if you are merely trying to be a reformed Catholic, as I am, then you are not making the sort of exclusivist claims that John and Charles Wesley made.
So are you looking to have a union back into Catholicism? And if they made certain reforms, you would then go back to the Catholic Church?
Yeah, and my entire denomination feels that way. That's my
Okay.
understanding.
So in Nathan James' question, this is perfect, which is like, yeah, actually, our heart would be a reunification with the Catholic Church where, listen, there's some great conversations. Father Thomas Hopko talked about what would have to happen for the Orthodox and the Catholics to come back together. And it's about a 30-minute talk. And it was, he's like, okay, here's where we have some fairly big, first we'd have to be conciliatory, like we would have to have councils again. We would be okay with like recognizing a highest hierarch, so to speak, but that highest hierarch can't make determinations that don't come out of the unity of the councils and stuff like that. So we all know that's like a big one, right? So that would have to be there. Obviously, filioque.
But it's doable.
But there are other things. Could it be? Yeah, but when you listen to what he's talking about, the reality is that. But when you look at the form of worship, right, which is a mass and a divine liturgy, like there in the veneration of Mary, like the incense, like there's a lot of things that come together, easily. Now there have been some as Catholicism is responding back as it's growing up in the West, right? And then as it starts responding to Protestantism and everything else, there have been some developments that have happened in Catholicism that the Orthodox would not agree with or whatever. But I think the point, like you're talking about, is like, one is, are you still in protest, or are you a view of the belief that, no, I think that's all wrong. I'm a low church, invisible church person, right? And I don't have any interest in trying to unify with the Catholics and do mass and, which is, I think that's a really good question for you to understand. Okay, this is where I'm at, right? And so I think that's a good way to frame it. But to come back, so here's something that I do think is interesting, which is we talked about, I can't share my screen because we don't have control over this, but I thought we could get to some universal stipulations on our first conversation.
If you want to read it, I'll actually put it up right in front of us, right? 3, 2, 1, now.
Okay. So, and I changed it a little bit. I had said virtually every Christian church, denomination or non-denomination, I'd first said that they believe they are following the true path and desire followers to join with them in their church. And you said, don't like true.
It's right? Binary. You can only be true or false.
And you came back and said, I like best path.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you were trying to get to this. I actually, as I thought about that moving forward, this is where we might have a disagreement. And I think this gets versus the boundaries and the tent poles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I actually think correct or right path would be better than best path. And so, but I understand. So what we're really talking about is, and this is your inclination, right? Which I think is, I'm going to concede that I think with Sam, I think we can move this conversation along, but I actually think I've always felt that I was on the right path, whichever church I was in at the time, right? Because I wouldn't be there. Now, I understand why you put out best, because you want to, like you talked about last time about hierarchies. Like, I think you would concede that where you found yourself, you think in your terms, I think I'm here in my church because I think it's the best path for me and my family. You could go to a number of different places in your city, but you've chosen. Why are you in the church that you're in right now, Matt?
Well, Okay, that's an important distinction, because best place for me, obviously we're all very comfortable with the follow-on statement from that, which is going to be, it might not be the best place for you, right? That's the mantra. There's a truism. I mean, it makes sense. Of course, I'm going to agree to that. So I'm not saying we want to say best in that statement because, for
Well,
me
just
and
think,
my
put
family, I
yourself in
need to be
each
in this
individual
tradition.
person. So
I'm saying theologically, I think some are more closer to the tent pole than others.
okay.
Uh,
And so you're in your church because you believe,
I think we have more things right than others.
okay.
I'm not saying we have it right and everyone else has it wrong.
Okay. This gets back to so now we're into the exclusivism, right? So this is
Yeah.
and being unwilling, which I think I'm willing to concede that I'm wrong, right? I thought that it would be pretty easy to come to a place, and again, I'll go back. I think given my age, given the denominational distinctives that I grew up that we argued about, because by the way, I didn't even know about Orthodoxy when I was in the 1980s, Matt.
I didn't know about it in the 90s.
So Catholicism, I knew about the Catholicism, and I had some Mormon kids that I went to school with, and then pretty much every flavor of Protestantism, right? So I always viewed myself, I just say myself, I thought I was on the correct or the right path. I was trying to find the way, right? I inherently, and so this is, maybe it's just a different, I inherently felt like there is a true, right, correct path. And that might have just been me. I think others kind of view it that way. So I wanted to be.
Yeah, you've convinced me that Wesleyan tradition, like you're not being an exemption to the rule. I think it sounds like normative Wesleyanism in the 70s and 80s.
Well, I just think like my Lutheran friends thought that they were in the right church, right? Like we all believe we're right. Like, and again, I think the words are important. Like,
let me, okay, I feel bad for Sam. Hopefully his ear's itching. Do you think that Sam is closer to the truth than somebody else? Anybody else? I'm going to get you to.
If you're going to ask me officially, the answer is, and Sam and I have had this conversation. So no, I do not.
Okay.
To me, I believe the only thing the only thing that makes sense if like, for example, if Christ existed before the foundation of the world, right? And if love existed it was a huge part, that is a relational thing. As I move through this, and as God has revealed through the Old Testament and everything else, I very much see, I'm very comfortable, and it makes sense to me in all the things, ontologically, metaphysically, common sense, everything else, the let us make in Genesis. But Sam has very good arguments against all this stuff. Okay, he and I have talked about this, right? So yeah. I don't think that he's on the correct path. But
you don't think he's closer?
Sam doesn't think I'm on the correct path. However,
I think he's closer than I could think of somebody, even hypothetically, that would not be as close to the path.
But here's where Sam is. Here's where Sam and I are closer.
Yeah.
I think we're all making exclusivist claims. I think that Protestants have tried to. So this is my argument. I think because I lived it. So I'm not mansplaining. I'm not mansplaining Protestantism. I lived it. I grew up in it. I was doing all the things.
Yep.
I grew up understanding that I had exclusivist claims and things that I disagree very much against with respect to Reformed, particularly true 5-point Calvinists. I also understood my 5-point Calvinist friends disagreed with me vehemently, right? And had their reasons and everything else and so on and so forth. So that's why I also think that, are you a Christian? Like, I want us to get past, like, I just believe we all make exclusivist claims. I think there are big differences between, let's just move down to Protestant world. Man, we have some massive differences that if we want to play the gotcha game, do you think I'm a Christian or whatever? And if I were an official member of that church, I'd like, I don't know, but that's up to God. I think that's where we all end up. But here's the thing that Sam pointed out, and that's why I think this is going to be important for us to continue to pull on this thread. I felt like, why are we letting these exclusivist claims trigger us? I believe we all make exclusivist claims, but in the end, we end up to, like I said, it's up to God. I think everyone ends up to that deal. There's another layer beyond this, and Sam is like, we're living in a time right now where we need to figure out, there's some fairly big societal things that are going on. Who am I more aligned with so we can come together, and where can we do this? And so I would point this out. So Gavin Ortland, as it relates to Orthodox, let's just say written views, exclusive views, or whatever, has massive differences, right? And I would say even you don't like the exclusivist claim that it's the one true church, right? Don't like that framing of it's the ark and that's the true church.
And you could see why, right? Like, it's not a coincidence that a Reformed Baptist has spent 2 years trying to get Orthodox people to admit that he's a Christian. It's for the same reason that I'm disagreeing with you about these exclusivist claims, because Reformed Christians this should not surprise us. Reformed Christians make exclusivist claims that are very broad. They say the exclusivism ends with mere Christianity. And then above that, we've got hierarchies. We've got good, better, and best.
So here'd be my pushback against that.
To nail Orthodoxy to that tent pole and admit hierarchy. And he doesn't like that the fence analogy is being maintained. So that's why he wants to be admitted as a Christian, because he's Reformed, because he doesn't believe that his denomination is exclusivist. He believes that.
Do we know what he believes?
The body of Christ is exclusivist. So he's like, I'm in the body. I'm just in a different room in the palace, and I need you to admit that. And so you could see that's the only reason why it triggers him so profoundly.
But to be fair, listen.
So he's not making the same exclusivist claim.
So here's where I point out.
Yeah.
I would say, first off, why does he have this weird deal that he has to force that situation? I would ask that question. But I kind of get it. Secondly, I would say, I can point to tons. What is he actually? Is he a 3-point Calvinist, a 5-point Calvinist? What is he? Has he ever sat down and said, these are the claims I'm making?
I think he has.
What is it?
I think he's done some. I think he's full. I think he's 5-point.
Okay.
I think he's.
So, man, if you're unwilling to live with the exclusivist claims that you make as a Calvinist, let's be intellectually honest with one another. I think it's trying to to me, it's like this gotcha game that doesn't make sense. And I would argue that you're making exclusivist claims. I would point out this, which is, so I want to talk to the Sam thing. So what Sam talked about is like, he agreed, like, if we're being intellectually honest, we are making some fairly exclusivist claims against one another. But what's most important is, hey, as we're moving into this new world, where can we find alignment, right? To where let's agree we are exclusivists and we do this, but hey, who's with me with some common fights? And so, for example, Father Josiah Trenum had a conference on basically the importance of the family, right? And needing to fight for that. He had 3 or 4 people show up. You know who one of the people he invited to be a part of that? Gavin Ortland.
Oh, really?
Why did he invite Gavin Ortland? Hey, we actually have some exclusivist claims, and I'm going to leave yours, whether you're a Christian or not. That's between you and God, whatever. Let's move past this. But hey, we do agree on the value of family, right? And traditional views on family and highlighting that. And so let's come together as it relates to those sorts of things, because we have common ground as we live in this country to come together, and let's find those places of unity as it relates to that. So we can have, that's encouraging. That's a positive. So we can do good, better, and best
tentpole approach with social issues, I guess. That would be one way that we could work together, is kind of what you're saying, right?
Get out of the who's a Christian fight. I think it's silly. I also think, and we'll have Sam on, I think Sam agreed, like, yeah, to be intellectually honest, if you're going to hold within your doctrines or whatever, they absolutely all reformed. They all make claims that other people aren't. They say, like, I read it in our first conversation, Matt, like, and I can even see some of the prominent people, like when Tim Keller was basically saying, I don't think George MacDonald was a Christian, right? So
and I don't think he was. I'm not sure he was either.
So, right. Yeah. So let's get past that dumb question. See, to me,
no, you have to at least admit that we're disagreeing about the extent to which we're using exclusivist claims. It's clear to me that they're different. We're not using it the same way to the same extent.
Right. So here's my argument that I think that, and I'm willing to concede, and I'm going to concede this. I thought it would be obvious to my natural inclination in the waters I swam in. I felt that it would be obvious to everyone. It's like, yeah, we all make exclusivist claims, right? I've heard it preached that Catholics are going to hell. I've heard it in all different elements and different denominations. Like it's just natural. It's normal. I've seen it preached on TV. I've heard it in conversation. Like, so I just felt like that was there. So, but in the pushback you're giving me, and clearly Phlebas, I know I'm not going to win over Phlebas. So I love you. That's okay. You're not the target audience for this, Phlebas. Love you. I'll keep coming in and keep commenting. But where I want to move past the exclusivist claims, and I think not triggering people so much, is because I felt like we all had it. It's like, now there's layers where I think we need to get to, instead of having these dumb worrying about whether orthos believe we're Christians or not. Let's move past that, or the bros, right? Or the pro bros who, can you also agree there have been pro bros for a long time too?
Oh, I mean, they're called cage stage.
Yeah, young. I was a zealous 20-year-old who was cocksure of everything and would argue with you about it and would white knight. Like, so that's why I have a lot of empathy. So I was older than the young, restless, and reformed guys by about 10 years. So, and I'm 10 to zealousness myself, right? But I had an appreciation for them and understood, like, young guys full of testosterone in their 20s and cocksure of everything, because I was that guy. So, like, when I saw Cage Stage, or I see, because there are Protestant guys that are out here engaging in these debates too. It's not, you know what I mean? Like, I just kind of give that up. I give that up to guys, young men in particularly. But I think the next move is, like, I felt like we make exclusivist claims. Let's move past this.
And we do. I'll give you this. We do make exclusivist claims. Historic Protestantism, like, there's 1,000 quote unquote denominations that are all just Independent Baptist or Church of Christ. Okay. But if we can put those all in one denomination, just for the sake of argument, most Protestant denominations have exclusivist claims. Actually, all of them do. It's just that the exclusivism falls at mere Christianity.
And so here's the question.
So I'm in agreement with you.
Here's the thread I think we're going to start. I think that we might start pulling on in the TLC.
Yeah.
So why do I have this conversation? Well, one is it just seemed natural, but secondly is, like, I want to move it past. Here's why I think it's important. And Sam helped me frame this, and I think I really want to invite him in on our next conversation, which is,
that'd be super cool.
Which is, we have some very interesting things happening in our country, right? We kind of have this whole Marxist, socialist, and kind of Muslim-like faction that's getting elected in New York. Like, we have some things that are going on. We do, right? I think the mere Christianity is dying. And here's where I think I want to call my Protestant brothers who don't want to make exclusivist claims. I want us to step back and think about it. What allows a church to go from, you were part of the United Methodist Church, how do we get to these fully, of not just affirming, but promoting, and like the chief marketing thing being affirming churches they can come about because we went to a mere Christianity, which boils it down to its lowest level, and then they can come back and say, and actually have a church that becomes a fully affirming, promoting LGBTQ plus church, right? So
That's very interesting. That's an interesting thesis. Yeah.
Well, I think it's obvious. So, like,
And can I just add a little bit of seasoning, because I think this reinforces your point. I think what we'll have to explore in the next conversation is like, I think that there are traditions, and I'm a member of one by conviction, that stridently affirms that good, better, best paradigm, which I don't think is, because mere Christianity would just be, it would just stop at the good. And maybe that could be one explorative difference. Maybe we do the fence approach to not, and we don't do tent poles. So, and that keeps us from the sort of social concerns that we have. Or maybe we do the good, better, best approach and have a positive definition of what that means. Maybe that helps. But I don't know, because the PCA is having their national convention, National Assembly this week. So was the PCUSA. Could you guess what was on the docket? The main concern for the PCA versus PCUSA?
Oh, there, yeah, okay.
PCUSA was debating whether or not polyamory should be an issue for for pastors, if they can be married to multiple people at the same time. That's their main thing that they're trying to navigate. I thought you would like that. Whereas the PCA is just trying to figure out if they need to be more conservative than they typically have been, and then Christian nationalism's on the docket. So it couldn't be more different.
Right.
I think that reinforces your point, because I think that's probably what we're going to explore is like, okay, maybe saying, well, minimum viable standards, then after that, we're not really going to investigate. Maybe on top of that, you build a bunch of social issues that take things off the rails. And maybe that historically has been the case. We could like decompose that, break it down, and see how, and then we talk about viable strategies of like, okay, well, can you do good, better, best, and actually with rigor, and maintain that? Or has that become a Jenga tower that doesn't work without proper fencing approaches like your tradition has? Yeah. What do you think about that? Does that?
Well, I think that we clearly are not going to see eye to eye. Like, we're just not. Like, there's some big essential issues and so on and so forth as it relates to us soteriologies and blah, 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 whatever. But there is things where we are going to agree. And so I think like the good, better, best, like Josiah Trenum had no problem inviting Gavin Ortland to come in and talk about marriage. Like, it was obvious, it's important. And so we're already recognizing, hey, these are places where we can come together and we can do that. I think also, like Sam asked the question, he's like, I think to some extent, one of the deaths of the mere Christianity, which, and by the way, C.S. Lewis did not have this be whatever you want Christianity. Let's be clear about that, right? That's not, but it's been watered down so much. We've been so afraid to actually make exclusivist claims that Christians are afraid to say you're in, you're out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's become this fear against this. And we, quite frankly, where can we come together? I think, like, for example, where can a Gavin Ortland and where can a Josiah Trenum, or where could me and you or whatever, is how did the CRC vote 70% to not go down that road? Is even the moderates were like, okay, wait, whoa, no. We are not deluding ourselves to this mere Christianity, which is, hey, as long as you're in a relationship with Jesus, that's all that matters. And we're gonna throw out, since the beginning of time, understandings of what is a man and what is a woman and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, there comes a point where you got to say, no, we're going to be exclusivist. And by the way, the emotional pressure that they tried to place on the floor of the synod floor to try and bend their will to their very low bar, mere Christianity, right? Resulted even in the moderates were saying, okay, no, we're not going here. Okay. Like, because there was these traditional value, like this is a bridge too far. So I think, and this is Glenn Scrivener pointed this out, are we seeing the resurgence of, and to use the term denominations, because we need to talk, like, are we going to start seeing a resurgence of actually standing for something, right? Of realizing that Christ does make exclusivist claims. And so those who would believe in some sort of an eternal separation would say a lot of Jesus's parables were, I'm going to gather this over here, and I'm going to do this over here, and these ones are in, and these ones are have some other thing that's going on with them. Like, that's pretty obvious. Like, wouldn't we all agree that's pretty obvious on its face? Just as
we all have to reconcile with that. Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus absolutely makes exclusivist claims, right? The way, the narrow way, follow me, do these things. And I think the big question we have, this is the tension I've always lived in, and I'm just okay with it. Like, and we started to talk about this last week was, and Sam kind of agreed this is it. Like, and there's big differences between Catholic and Orthodox, but by and large, like, either the fullness of the church was this liturgy and was this Eucharist and was the veneration of Mary and icons, and then, like, either they didn't really get it that wrong, and that was a fullness of the church, a visible church here that Christ established, or the Protestants were right and were like, hey, you guys got off base pretty dang early, and you guys started doing things that actually Christ didn't want. We're taking us back to the primitive Acts 2 Bible-based, and where you might want to be protest and come in. I've always lived in the tension. Like, I knew as a Protestant, I'm like, either we're right, or they're right. Like, and I'm okay living in that. Like, I'm just like, I always felt like that was obvious.
And I've always lived in this some are more right than others. The same as we're talking about with social issues.
Right.
If we believe that, right. Well, yeah, but and of course we always think we're more right than someone else, at least in a way. That's kissing cousins with exclusivism, but it's not the same, because we're all saying, it sounds like a lot of us are saying Christ himself saves us, not our doctrinal beliefs about Christ. So if that's the case, then there's going to be distinctions. Ultimately, Jesus makes eschatological claims about sheep and goats, for instance. But until that time, we've got descriptions of gradation, to proximity. If it's about your proximity to Christ, then I can be 5 steps from him and you could be 2 steps from him. And we could talk about that relational distinction that isn't just a binary, because then I can walk 10 steps back from Christ, and that's farther from your proximity to him, but that's still not you know what I mean? Like, I think we could do better resolution, like some higher resolution framing. That's why I like good, better, best, because I think it allows for like a affirmative statement about that is exclusivist, but doesn't limited to the confines of a denomination which necessarily by its definition is defined by propositional statements. And we're saying Christ is not in submission to propositional statements. So if we believe that, it sounds like you and I both believe that, then why would we say that a denomination which is propositionally defined is coterminous with his body, But that's why someone like Gavin Ortlund, obviously he's a Baptist, so I don't agree with him about a lot of things. I actually agree with the Orthodox on a lot of things when it comes to baptism, right. Of course. But like, that's why he's going to be upset, and he's going to be like a dog chasing a bone until somebody just to help us land the plane, until somebody, and it looks like it was a former Christian Reformed, a Dutch Calvinist who was able to actually help him move forward because it was someone who, it wasn't someone with just a Baptist background or evangelical. It was someone who actually knows where Gavin's coming from, his heritage theologically, and can speak to it in a way that Gavin could recognize that it wasn't a caricature or it wasn't hearsay. He could actually point to those statement concerns and priorities, in the Westminster Confession and elsewhere, and say, I know what's in your confessional statements, and I could represent them fairly with familiarity, and I disagree with them. I think that completely disarmed. I mean, we're not here to give commentary on somebody else's conversation, but I think that helped tremendously. And I think, and it's fascinating because we're all doing this in English, we're all doing this on YouTube. I think that's why you and I get excited, Lance, about what's happening interdenominationally, maybe ecumenically, although in some circles that's a bad word, but you get the meaning of that, because we're all, for the first time in 2,000 years, the first time since Pentecost, we're all talking about these disagreements in the same language, in the same play space, which is fascinating. And inevitably, you're going to mix. It's, at some point, some Reformed Baptist is going to bump up against somebody who basically had the same primary beliefs and went to Westminster Seminary. This is like the Harvard of Calvinism, right? and then became an Orthodox, like a OCA priest, and then can say, let me speak in your language, in your theological language, and in your vernacular, what we agree with and what we do not agree with. And that's gonna change the world, and it is changing the world, which is so fascinating. It happened to you, like you said, like you didn't know what Orthodoxy was, and you found it because it was part of your neighborhood. It's part of your world now, when it historically it has not been for any of us in the Anglosphere. So whatever is happening, obviously God's church is merging. There's some chemical reactions going on. There's some things popping off. There's things that just have not been on the same shelf are now super close. But I think things are, God, I don't know, Jesus seems to be unifying his church, if I could be frank. And part of that has to do with the subversive use of the internet, with all these people having to talk to each other in this the radically democratizing force of social media, and if they want to talk at all, they have to talk as peers, and they're going to change their minds slowly, and hopefully they find, selfishly, I'm going to say, hopefully they find that they agreed on the primaries more than they gave each other credit for, and give each other more grace on the secondaries, because I'm a good, better, best framework guy. But are you encouraged by the way things are going? Do you see there's a momentum towards greater unity?
I'm okay with not agreeing with my brother and understanding that there are exclusivist claims, whether it's Orthodox, Protestant, or whatever. And so I've always felt like that. And I understand, I'm fine submitting to what Orthodoxy is saying, right? Like, I'm totally fine with that. That being said, so I don't think we would say that it's good, better, best in terms of the practice. Well, let me take that back. I have heard, like, for example, Metropolitan Jonah made a comment that our kissing cousins in the Protestant world are the charismatics, because they get this deep sense of God is everywhere present, filling all things. Mm-hmm. He's not a God that's out. Imagine, that it's present and active and stuff. So I do think, I'm always gonna stipulate to the fact, yes, Orthodoxy is making the claim, this is the fullness, this is what Christ established. And so, of course, we're going to say these are these walls, like you mentioned, versus a tent person. However, Orthodox can point out and say, yeah, we're more like, people from here have a better time coming in here because we're closer with respect to that. But I think as we move past where I think we ultimately want to get to is I want us to get past having these. I just feel like it's obvious, like as a Protestant, I just felt like the Catholics were dead wrong. That's what I was taught, and that's what I believed in terms of their form of worship and everything else, and Mary and like everything. So I'm okay living with that, and one side's going to be right or wrong. I'm just going to tell you that, and I'm okay with that. The best you can do is choose where you're going to follow. But I think moving on to the good, better, best, as you start talking about, as we move into moving together in affecting the communities and the ecclesia that we live in, and I'm speaking to United States because that's all I can speak to. I think we have to move past this pluralistic coexist mere Christianity, the lowest not bar denomination, because we're getting to the point where we're going to have to stand for things and make exclusivist claims that in this day and age make some people very uncomfortable. The CRC had to do that within their own synod, and it was hard. But they ultimately stood up and said, no, this is not part of what we're going to do in this church. And they had to stand on that. And so when you say good, better, best, that's why Josias Trenum can look at Gavin Ortland and be like, no, I'm not going to get into this gotcha. Do you see a Christian or whatever? I think it's obvious on a face if we're intellectually honest. We have some very big disagreements and whatever. But man, when it comes to this, we're in total agreement. Let's come together where we can come together. And so leave all the theology and the dogma, whether you think I'm a Christian or not a Christian at the, it's kind of there. And I think what you're talking about is like, this is a little clumsy term, like traditional Christianity. Like, I think those who hold a fairly traditional Christianity, even if that were Reformed or Orthodox or Catholic or whatever, right, versus like going down to this mere Christianity, which is trying to break down all distinction and exclusion and just say everybody's in. And that's happened in the Catholic Church, right? That's happened across. We've had divorces of every mainline denomination, every single stinking one of them. Yep. So we've already started to have that sort of stuff. And so I think I want to move past these stupid in-out conversations to where don't let this trigger us so we can come together on what I think are agree to disagree and understand we have exclusions, but let's come together on some of these other things because I think it's going to become more important moving forward, Matt.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like even if it frustrates some folks who come from traditions where they will say, I think you are a Christian, in that other denomination, and you are telling me I'm not a Christian, that's the Gavin Ortland Orthodoxy conversation. Even if that frustrates people, that could be I'm going to go with you on this. There's a humility to say that needs to be explored where we can say, I can even just, if I believe that Christ alone, Christ himself saves sinners, then we can even disagree on that. I don't need to, just because I call you a Christian doesn't mean that you have to call me a Christian in response. And we could find, it's probably calling it social issues kind of puts it in a safe little container box. And I said that earlier in this conversation. I probably shouldn't say that, but there's dramatic, profound, important work to be done where we can say, we can positively identify who is in proximity to us that we can be arm in arm with to work to help community, help the public space, help the future thrive. Absolutely. And maybe that's maybe all these disagreements is a phase that folks are going through, or maybe it's a perennial issue that we have to remind ourselves where distinctions are clearly historically and in the present tense being made, but those clearly also don't preclude us from working together in our shared communities, in our shared countries, for our offspring, and for the health and wellness of our communities. Those are great points.
And I think to tee off, because we're probably going to end here, but I would say, and I think we'll linger on this, and look at me coming on your channel and trying to dictate terms. I think we invite Sam into our next conversation. And I'd propose, and I'm giving Sam credit for this, he's like, he agreed on, we got Christians, we got to figure out like, hey, we're more like, who are the folks that we are better aligned with to attack some of the things that are right in front of us, right?
Yeah.
And then he also had said, and I think this thing is like, do we need to move past the mere Christianity and get comfortable with some exclusivism as we see the rise of Muslimism, Hinduism, all sorts of other things happening in our country, the rise of this Marxist socialist kind of fervor that's kind of being whipped up in amongst certain groups or whatever. Like, do we need to start being more comfortable, and then where can we move past these things where you and I've been kind of stuck in? Where can we find common ground in as mere Christianity? We need to move past that, because that has caused this coexist plurality, can't take it to the public square, can't make any sort of claims they're going to hurt someone's feelings, which ultimately leads us to the mess we find ourselves in right now.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, well, I think we've got part 3 sketched out for us. If Sam Tiedemann will oblige us, that would be a great 3-way conversation.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Lance, for spending this hour with me and conversing. This has been really, I think it, unless Father Stephen DeYoung drops another video the same hour as this comes out, I think we've had a helpful discussion. I think we really did make some very positive, measurable progress in the conversation. And I look forward to how it's going to be even further progressed next time.
Absolutely. Always appreciate talking with you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for checking out the Scrollers podcast. We'll see you again next time.